Hurricane Milton is strengthening in the Gulf of Mexico, and we now have hurricane watches for the west coast of Florida. Good Monday morning. I'm Mike Naso with the video update on our hurricane. Taking a look at the Gulf of Mexico, there is Milton sitting in the western Gulf of Mexico, almost the Bay of Campeche, and it's moving very slowly east, even a little east-southeast, and we have hurricane warnings along the Yucatan Peninsula because it could get pretty close, but we expect it to go just north of the Yucatan and then glide into the Florida coastline by Wednesday as a very dangerous hurricane. Here's the latest as of 4 a.m. Central Time, 5 a.m. Eastern from the National Hurricane Center. Hurricane Milton was at 22.1 north, 92.6 west. Winds are up to 100 miles per hour, so it's a Category 2 hurricane, and it's been strengthening overnight down to 972 millibars in the pressure. It's drifting, moving very slowly east-southeast at about 8 miles per hour, and that is expected to become more easterly and then east-northeast and then eventually northeast over the next 48 hours towards the west coast of Florida. We do have a hurricane watch in effect from the Dry Tortugas and then from Chokoloskee all the way up towards Suwannee River. That includes Tampa Bay. And we have a hurricane warning, as I mentioned, for the north coast of the Yucatan Peninsula. Now, hurricane force winds only extend out about 25 miles from the center, so that hurricane warning is just in case Milton gets close enough to clip the Yucatan or come very close. I remember back in 2002, we had Hurricane Isidore, and it left western Cuba, and it was forecast to go just north of the Yucatan, and it ended up going inland near Merida and Progreso and really slammed the Yucatan hard. Whether or not Milton actually makes landfall in the Yucatan, we don't know. It looks like it's going to miss it to the north, but it's going to get pretty close. You're definitely going to get clipped by tropical storm force winds. Now, as Milton moves throughout the Gulf of Mexico, it's going to fluctuate in intensity. It's expected to become a Category 4 hurricane, and even though it may weaken by the time it gets to Florida, it's still expected to be at least a Category 2 or 3, and it might increase in size, so don't expect it to be this tiny when it's striking Florida. It could be much larger than it is right now. Here's a water vapor loop, and I wanted to show this because I wanted to show how the system has been undergoing some fluctuations. It almost appears as though it underwent some sort of eye wall replacement cycle, even though the aircraft earlier on Sunday night and early Monday did not indicate that. The eye right there and fluctuating, it does appear as though it's gradually strengthening, so it should become a major hurricane later today, Category 3, or at least by early on Tuesday. But again, whether or not it has some interaction with the Yucatan Peninsula, the Yucatan is right there where I drew that white line, so it's getting close. Nevertheless, it should eventually slide more towards the east-northeast, but if you're in the northern Yucatan, be ready for a possible hurricane impact from Milton. Now, the motion here is expected to eventually pull north. We have this system here over Florida that's really been causing some nasty rain and kind of a precursor event. This should move out, and as it does so, it'll kind of have less influence on our Hurricane Milton, but right now there is some interaction between the two, and that could be why this system's kind of headed in this way, kind of dragging Milton almost to the south, and that's why it's going to get close to the Yucatan. After, say, 24 hours, we'll have troughiness move into the Gulf, and that should scoop Milton up and accelerate him towards Florida. But again, there is still a lot of uncertainty where exactly in Florida he hits and how strong, and whether or not we actually have an impact here on the northern coastline of the Yucatan. It's pretty unusual to have a system drag this far east. I mean, 800-900 miles from Mexico to Florida and in that direction, but it has happened before. Now, the forecast models, the GFS ensembles, are in reasonably good agreement, although look at some of them do clip the northern Yucatan. So we'll wait and see if it gets too far south. Like I said, we could have landfall. That could have implications on intensity. If it messes with the system, kind of weakens it. That's what happened with Hurricane Isidore in 2002. Or it could head a little bit more on the northern edge. Either way, after, say, 48 to 50 hours, it should be taking dead aim at the mid part of the western coastline of Florida in the general vicinity of Tampa Bay. But again, everybody in that hurricane watch needs to be ready and taking action. As I mentioned, there is some interaction between this area of disturbed weather in the eastern Gulf and the hurricane, and that could be why it's kind of dragging southeast. But once that gets out of there, the rainfall will stop in Florida, but it will soon start again as the hurricane moves on in. Now, how much water rise can we expect? Well, right now they're saying a Category 3 hurricane, but because it's probably going to be a larger storm and a stronger one, a Category 4 offshore, it's going to build up a lot of water. We saw what happened with Helene near and south where you have the onshore flow of where the eye makes landfall. And Tampa Bay, 12 feet, 8 to 12 feet. Charlotte Harbor, 5 to 10 feet, and then lower amounts as you go further away from the storm. But right now, it could be a big problem. And when we look at where the hurricane is expected to hit as of 5 a.m. on Monday morning, landfall is expected somewhere in the general vicinity of Longboat Key, right near Sarasota Bay. That would bring the eye of the hurricane directly over Bradenton and areas there near Sarasota. Very, very nasty. And Tampa, you'd be in the northern part of the circulation. Now, the surge would be where you have onshore flow. So that would be areas here south of Sarasota like Venice, Port Charlotte, Charlotte Harbor, Captiva Island, maybe down near Sanibel. So again, everybody needs to watch and listen to your local officials. I know mass evacuations are already beginning, and they will continue throughout the day on Monday. Rainfall will be a problem. We'll see that system move out into the Atlantic that we mentioned in the eastern Gulf, but that kind of soaked Florida a little bit, and now we're going to have rain from the hurricane moving in. The good news is it should be accelerating, but that doesn't mean it's not going to drop copious amounts of rain, and we will have at least a moderate flood risk. This might even go to high over areas of Florida through the next 48 hours. Out of the Tampa Bay area weather forecast office from the National Weather Service, hurricane watches for coastal and inland areas are posted, storm surge watches, life-threatening storm surge, major hurricane force winds, and flooding rainfall possible beginning on Wednesday. And they want you to restock your disaster supplies, complete the preparations by Tuesday, by tomorrow. So you have today. It's still out there, way out in the western Gulf, but as I mentioned, it's going to accelerate towards the coast. So time will be passing by very quickly come Tuesday. Follow evacuation orders from local officials. Consider your threats. Storm surge is what kills. Are you in a low-lying area? Are you susceptible to storm surge? Wind, are you away from the wind? Flooding from heavy rainfall. Look at what happened with Hurricane Helene. Inland flooding is something that's very devastating with many hurricanes. You can run from the water, hide from the wind. That's kind of what you want to do. So if you're in a low-lying area and they tell you to leave, you'll want to do so. Again, this hurricane is getting better organized. It's a Category 2 hurricane as of Monday morning. Forecast, unfortunately, is strengthened into a Category 3 and then a Category 4 by the time it is moving through the central Gulf of Mexico. So everybody needs to be ready for this thing. I'm Mike Naso with a video update on Hurricane Milton. Stay tuned, and I'll be back as we continue to watch this hurricane strengthen and glide through the Gulf of Mexico towards Florida.